Hello, my name is Megan Bennett and I work here at the Farmington Public Library, and today I'm going to show you some cross-stitching. Now, cross-stitching is a fun and complicated way of producing a pattern on some fabric with embroidery thread. It looks similar to embroidery, and embroidery and cross-stitching are sometimes used interchangeably, but they are not the same thing. So we're going to have, at the reference desk, we're going to have some cross-stitch kits available. And if you follow me down to the table. All right, so once you pick up your kit, you take it home. And this particular bag is very simple because there's only 3 things in it: a rack card, the cross-stitch kit itself, and a golf pencil. So I'm going to open up the kit and show you what's in it. So a cross-stitch kit, if it looks like this, is going to have the fabric, all of the embroidery thread that you need, a cross-stitch or tapestry needle, and the hoop that you would use to attach the kit. So let's open this up carefully, carefully, carefully. We've got 1 tapestry needle. We've got a hoop. We've got the pattern and the picture of the pattern. We've got the pattern itself, which, as you can see, has lots of detail in it, and I will explain what that means in a second. And then we have another piece here that shows you in a variety of languages how cross-stitching works. And I will demonstrate that in a second. We have the embroidery thread itself, and we have the canvas. Now, before you put the canvas in the hoop to cross stitch, you need to figure out where the center of your canvas is so that you can start your cross stitching. So let me fold this up and get it out of the way. I'll turn this around so I can see it. And the thing that cross stitching does is each color on here has a symbol or letter associated with it on the pattern. So you don't have to keep flipping your pattern over and over again to see whether the little dark black square, what color the little dark black squares are, because if you look on your embroidery thread here, it's this kind of very, very dark gray, which in this particular pattern makes up the wheels of a bicycle. What you do is you take you open up your needle. Now, this is not a sharp needle. It's a blunt needle, but it can still hurt if you stab yourself with it. So being careful with that. You take your canvas and you fold it in half in both directions. And then you want to mark the exact center, or as close to the exact center as you can get, stitch. The reason for that will be demonstrated in a second. So leave the needle there. Now, this is a classic embroidery hoop, so you need to unscrew it. Some people like putting the screw to the left, some people like putting the screw to the right. It does not matter, it just depends on your preference. Put the lower piece, the smaller piece without the screw, down, center your fabric around it, and carefully work the top of the hoop around the bottom hoop. And it may take a couple tries, may take longer than you'd like, and just make sure you leave that screw as loosely as possible, otherwise you'll never get the hoop around it. Once you get the hoop on, hold it tightly, and carefully work that screw down. Sometimes it helps if you pick it up and, oop, you have to do it a couple times. Make sure you keep that dot centered. This is always my least favorite part of starting a cross stitch, is getting the hoop onto the fabric. Okay. Now, the purpose of the hoop is to keep the fabric tight while you're cross stitching so that you can clearly see the holes. If you can't see the holes in the video, don't worry, I've got a demonstration set to the side that I will show you how the holes work in relation to your fabric. So keep that needle there. If you can, widen the hole a bit so you can clearly make it out. And set your hoop to the side. Look at your pattern. You'll notice that there are arrows on the left on all four sides that point to the exact center of your pattern. So mine is here. Now I'm marking that because cross stitch is counted out and down in a circle from the center. So you will notice that if you wanted to do, say, this line right here, you would count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 out to the right, and 1, 2, 3, 4 up. Okay, so let's mark that thing right there so we know that. So that's 8 and 4. And that looks like a little equal sign, and the equal sign is, ooh, this bright, pretty red. So you need to take your embroidery thread out. Sometimes it likes to play with its friends. Separate out a single strand or a single piece. Okay. And then you may have to flip it over, but I can tell you that if it has a symbol and not a line, you are using 2 strands of embroidery thread. And this is 6 strands, so carefully separate out 2 strands. And again, if this looks a little weird, you can always check Creative Bug or YouTube for some demonstrations on how to do this if you can't see it very clearly or if you just want to hear someone else say it as well. This takes a little bit of time. It likes to tangle up in itself, so if it tangles up, just keep going. Eventually, there we go, you should have 2 strands of embroidery thread. Now, before you thread your needle, you're going to want to make that count. So pick up your embroidery thread, and from where you've put the needle, you need to pull it out and count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 4 up. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now if you're off by 1 or 2, it's not really a big deal. Because you'll be counting in relative to each other. So if you're off by a stitch or if you're off by a square or 2, as long as you stick to that pattern within the thing and you know that you're, say from this stitch you're going down 1 and over 1, it's not really going to be a big deal. So now I'm going to mark that stitch there. I can see where it is. I'm going to thread my needle. And cross-stitching always starts from behind. So you're going to want to pick up your hoop. You're going to want to find that stitch. Now I always find it easier to just flip the hoop over and pick that stitch up from behind because I can see where it is a little more clearly. And you want to make that stitch. Now cross-stitching is always done from lower left to upper right, and I will demonstrate this on a bigger thing. I just want to show how it looks on the hoop. And you're going to make that stitch. So lower left or to upper right, you're going to pull it through. And on the back, you're going to make sure that you catch the back of your yarn. You're just going to pull it through again. Now I have a little, looks like that, and I have a little extra tail yarn, so I just pull that down and pull it out, and that is enough to keep that particular yarn in place, and it won't pull out when you keep doing your stitching. Always make sure that you mark off a stitch when you're done. So this stitch is only 1. It's a single line of stitching. So since we only have 1, you're just going to go up to the side. Oops, I went through the wrong hole. So if you ever do that, just pull it back out and just move it up. And then I'm going to cross over. And then for this stitch here, mark it off. I'm going to go down 1 and 1 to the left to make the beginnings of it looks like the seat. Okay? So sometimes I'll flip it over, but I'm just going to demonstrate. I'm going to put it in here. A little complicated to see again. I will show you in just a second on a larger screen. So down 1, over 1, and again, lower left, upper right. Since it's only 1 stitch, I'm going to flip it over. Do that, just the right spot, and mark it over. Now cross stitching takes a lot of time. So if you're doing this and you're not getting anywhere, don't stress about it, don't worry about it. It does take a very long time to get the rhythm of the stitching done and the rhythm of the counting down. Once you get that done, it'll be a lot easier to figure out what you're doing. So I'm going to leave that like that, and I'm going to hold up one that I've done a little bit of work on, because there are two stitching and cross stitches. The cross stitch that you see here, which gives it its name, and then the line stitching here that adds depth to a pattern. So I'm going to pull out one that I worked on a little bit to show you. It's of a different pattern. And you can see here that we've got a little bit of the depth stitching here, and how this one, it's kind of difficult to see what it is because there's no additional stitching. So I'm going to demonstrate how to do the single line stitching right there. So as you can see on this pattern, I've been marking off all the stitches I've done. We're going to do this, and this has a number here, and that number is on the back identified, which color it is. So we're looking for that pattern, looking for this one here. Separate that out. Whenever you're doing line stitching on cross stitch, you're only going to use one strand of embroidery floss. As if I can get it out, there we go. Instead of the usual two. This is going to look and feel a lot more like sewing if you've ever done sewing before. Okay. And in this one, you do want to knot your thread. You do not knot your thread. Regular cross stitching. You can if you'd like to. There's nothing wrong with it. Okay. And so what you do here is you're going to look at what you have stitched and where their patterns are, and you're going to start in the back. I always go backwards with my stitching. So I would go one step below where it is, right here. Actually, I'm one off. Right here, and I would take the mark there and just go backward. And in this case, you just pull very gently until you reach the end of your knot, and then you would count. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So for me, I would go to one past those pink, right in the middle of the white-ish part. And I'd put that in there. And I would continue this setup, so we're going to cross over that stitch there. It's kind of hard to see the white part, I know. I can find a lot of these other videos on places like YouTube, and I'm just going to cross over like that. If you want to do it forwards instead of backwards, that's absolutely easy. I find it easier to do backwards instead of forward. Okay. And now since you're sitting there going, I can't see those stitches, they're so small, I'm going to bring out something else. So let me get this pattern here. And let me bring out my whiteboard. So my whiteboard, you can see it's got some little blue dots on it. Each one of those dots represents a dot that you would find on your cross-stitching canvas. I'm going to use black to represent the stitching. So if we go back to this bicycle here, we find the approximate center, which is, let's just say here for good measure. Okay. And actually, I need to turn it around because I realized you need to go 8 out and 4 up. You would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, looks like I only have 7, so let's just go, okay, I guess I don't have the center. Okay. And let's just make that where our starting point. Okay. So if we're going to go for that little stitch up there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you would start your stitching here and go up like that. That's just how you would count. But if we were to figure out what do the stitches look like across the board in general, you'd start here and you'd go 1 across the top, and on the back of the fabric you do down. So the orange represents the down. And then you do across, down again, and then lower left, upper right. I think I'm going to do 6 stitches here. There's 4, 5, and 6. So if you have a line of 6 and you're done, on the back you do the same down. And here's where you make the cross. You go bottom right to upper left. And you repeat the same down on the back. And then you go lower right to upper left. You repeat the same down on the bottom. Lower right to upper left. Repeat the same down. Up. Down. Cross your stitches. Go down. Cross your stitches. Now let's say that your next stitch is here. Okay. So that would be starting from here, 1 down and 2 to the right of your original stitches. So on the back, you would simply do doop, 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 doop on the back of your board, and you would pull your thread out right here and go like that. Down. So I'm going to stop doing the downs. It's going to look like 5, 6 stitches there, go down, cross them back over. When you're done, or when you reach a point that you can see what you're looking at, it's not just a handful of random red stitches, your entire board will be covered in little X's or crosses. It'll look a little bit like this. And every time you count from a stitch that you know where it is, and you count down, and then right or left, or up, and then right or left. So if you were going from here, let's say you were going 3 left and 2 down, you would go 1, 2, 3 left, 1, 2 down, and you'd start here. The back of your canvas is going to look very straight with up and down stitches on it. The front of your canvas is going to have all of the neat little X's. When you're doing the single strand that I mentioned, where you're doing the detail stitching, you're going to take whatever thread you need and you're going to go inside your stitching. So if you need to start here again, you'd say put your needle here, and you would do a design to here. And then you would do to here. And then on the back of the board, you might go to here and cross over to that one there. So you went over 2 stitches there. You might even come back over to there to make a little pattern and bring out the detail in a bicycle wheel, a flower petals, pineapple, unicorn, stuff like that, that is difficult to see until you bring the pattern on top of it. And if you have any questions, you can always give us a call, or you can check Creative Bug and see if they have any videos on cross-stitching. If you don't like any of those, you can just YouTube cross-stitching and see if there's a cross-stitcher who makes videos that you really like to watch, and see if that can help you. And after that, have a nice day and have fun with your cross-stitching.